Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too much at all.
Welcome to Too Much with Denise Love Hewett. Today's episode, I think everyone's been thinking about it. We're talking about AI. It's in the zeitgeist. It feels like every headline is doom and gloom and making us scared for our collective future. I don't think we should be scared, but rather aware and prepared. So I brought Dr. Nataliya Kosmyna here. You may know her name from the viral study she did about AI and critical thinking. More on that later. But she's a leader in neurotech and is also committed to creating the infrastructure for the ethical landscape around AI. I'm going to read you her bio, and then we're going to dig right in. Dr. Kosmina is a research scientist at MIT's Media Lab's Fluid Interfaces Group and a visiting faculty researcher at Google. She has over 16 years of experience in developing and designing end-to-end brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. Coming from a background in artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and human-computer interaction, she is passionate about the idea of creating a partnership between AI and human intelligence, a fusion of the machine with the human brain. Nataliya obtained her PhD in 2015 in the domain of non-invasive brain-computer interfaces, BCI. So if we keep saying it, you guys are in the lingo, from Université Grenoble-Alpes, France. Most of her projects are focused around BCIs in the context of consumer-grade applications. Nataliya is a public speaker, author of multiple research papers, and a reviewer of numerous professional journals and conferences. Dr. Kosmina often collaborates with teams from Boston Dynamics, Microsoft Research, and NASA. Dr. Kosmina's solutions are successfully deployed in the classrooms, hospitals, workspaces, aerospace, lower Earth orbit, and on the moon. These projects are also presented to the general public and were tested by more than 16,000 people in 2015 to 2025. Nataliya has won multiple awards for her work, among which is the L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science Award. She received that in 2016. Nataliya was also named as one of the top 10 French talent 2017 from MIT Innovators Under 35. Dr. Kosmina served as one of 24 international experts for UNESCO to help prepare a first draft of the recommendation on the ethics of neurotechnology. The final text of the recommendation will be presented for adoption in November 2025 at the 43rd session of the General Conference. She is currently serving on the expert advisory group on neurotechnology in children for UNICEF. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Very exciting.
What an impressive resume.
Thank you. Thank you.
What I really love about your work specifically is I got to do a dive, watch all of Nataliya's talks, and I've read her study, is that you are a scientist and technologist, but you really are human first.
I mean, we are designing and we are working for humans, right? What is there to do tech for tech, right? We want to solve the problems for humans, and humans ultimately are the only ones who matter. Like everything else is just some support tools, right? And humans, their desires, wishes, fears, need for success is what actually, drives my work at least. And I think it should drive a lot of other people's work if they want to support humans and ensure that they succeed.
But that's what is rare, is that I don't see a lot of other AI CEOs or scientists talking about AI in the way that you do. And that's what gives me a lot of hope, is that you're bringing emotional intelligence to the discipline in a way that I don't think everyone is really looking at it as holistically.
I agree with you here. I do think that obviously a lot of companies, a lot of AI, if you're talking now about AI companies, right? They of course do only talk about AI. It's AI first, and we see how it ends up, right? Again, they're in the business for profit business, right? Most of them, of course, and they do not really seem to willing to measure the impact of their tools on the users. And that is a problem because we do want to understand what those tools, right? They're there to stay. We understand this. It's not good. It's not bad, right? We should not demonize those tools. But the idea is if these are integrating right now at this crazy speed, like the unprecedented speed we haven't seen before, all of the aspects of our lives, we do need to ask questions. Some of those will be hard questions. What these tools do to our cognition, to our perception, to our performance, are they really even making us more performant, more creative, and critically understand and have guidelines? I'm pretty sure, and we do hear about some success stories. They're all early stories, right? Because the technology available to public at least is barely 3 years old, right? Of course, it is much, much older. It was not created, designed overnight. But the need to understand it, especially if there is such an aggressive, I would really use this word, aggressive push of integrating this technology, these closed for profit models in all of our lives. Let's maybe pause and understand what they actually do to us, to developing brains, to adult brains, and then make those decisions, design the guidelines and guardrails.
I love this approach because this is how we're going to create the best outcome for us and the technology. I so appreciate that being your lens. And for anyone who is more fear based, if we look at your work, we point to your work, you give us a lot of peace that it doesn't have to be this scary thing. It can be this really powerful tool. And so you recently completed a preliminary study on how AI reduces humans' critical thinking abilities, sort of. We'll talk about, yes, that's a yes. And you released it before it could be peer reviewed because you had some concerns for the public, because you didn't want this to be 8 months down the line. And we've made choices, as referencing what you said, where we have AI for kindergarten and then we're disadvantaging young children and how we're developing their brains. So before we begin to the basics of the study, just because not everyone here is fluent in the language, can you tell people what an LLM is?
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to use some of the language. I will try to explain it is the most lay person terms, and I obviously will reference our paper, our work, some of other papers and works, because it's not only us, right? That's great news. A lot of amazing researchers and teams around the world actually look into this. So LLMs are large language models, right? So these are the ones we're going to be talking here about. We're going to be heavily mentioning, maybe in parts of this conversation, ChatGPTs, because we used in our paper, in our research, ChatGPT, right? But there are plenty. So those who you might heard about are, of course, Gemini, right? You might have heard about Claude and all the others, right? So there are plenty. So it's not because we are singling out ChatGPT for any reason. It's because we used it in our work, in our paper, and we're going to be heavily mentioning that one. But of course, theoretically, since we're going to be talking about a lot of other papers, looked into other models, right? And other thing I'm going to be mentioning, you already introduced, is brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. So we're going to be mentioning this. So if I say BCI for some reason, that's going to be another term. Other than that, I will try to not use any heavy vocabulary whatsoever.
Great. So let's talk about the study, because it's not crazy complicated, but there are a few different control groups that you use. So let's break down what those groups were, the differences, and then what we can glean from that study.
Yes, so we did invite to the lab in person 60 students from greater Boston area, so Massachusetts, United States. Out of those 60 subjects, 60 students, 54 completed the study. So we are reporting in our paper about those 54 students. We invited them to perform very specific task, which is essay writing. So we asked them to write an essay. And we divided those 54 students in 3 groups. First group was allowed to use this LLM, specifically ChatGPT, as I mentioned. So they couldn't do anything else, right? They only had access to ChatGPT and could use ChatGPT. Second group was able to use search engine, the specific use case Google, without AI functionality. So you know that now on top of your search, web search, you have like a summarization of the query you are asking for. So that was off. So we did not turn this on. So you have your like OG old school Google search. And then the third group, we call it tools free or brain only group in the paper. You might already guess where that is heading. We actually did not allow them to use any tools whatsoever, no books, no nothing, no Google search, no LLMs. So they literally just had a computer and they needed to use their brain only to write those essays. We, of course, realize that essay is it's a pretty complicated task, right? It's creativity, it's structure, there's a lot of components to it. So we gave them only 20 minutes. And of course, it could be argued it's a pretty short time. We thought that it's like average time we hear a lot of students these days are using to write an essay. So, but it was a specific short time. But of course, we understood that, hey, if I'm going to give you like a topic like quantum physics and you actually know nothing
Yeah.
about that, well, you're not going to write, even if I'm going to give you 3 days straight, that might not be really ending up in any good of an essay. So we picked up SAT type of prompts for the essays. So something that is like high level. For example, is there a perfect society? Topics of philanthropy or happiness, right? So something high level that hopefully everyone is actually able to write about, and you do not really need any specific prior knowledge about that. So it also, in addition to that, gave you a choice. If you were our participant, like Denise, let's say, I'm gonna be using you as an example of our participant, yes. So if you were our participant also, as everyone else, you would actually have a choice among 3 topics for each of the sessions you were coming to the lab. So it's not just, I'm gonna force you to write about perfect society. You actually had a choice among 3 different topics for each of the sessions. And there were 3 sessions in total. So that's what the study was about. In the very end, we, of course, asked each participant to couple questions. So, for example, can you quote your essay?
Yeah.
Did you follow structure? So, as always, in a lot of studies, we will ask questions. So, it was happening right after you gave your essays to us. Additionally, we asked 2 English teachers to help us rate those essays. So, we asked them without their knowledge, prior knowledge about the study, so they were not with us on the study from the beginning. We actually asked them, hey, here are the essays. Could you please help us evaluate those essays, right? Just score them, come up with your ranking, and just give them back to us and explain your logic, your reasoning. So they didn't actually know the details of the study and groups and nothing like that. We just let them know that the students were limited in 20-minute slots, etc. And then finally, we recorded brain activity of those students. So we used a cap with 32 channels, so it's basically covering your head fully. And this measure, what we used, is called EEG or electroencephalography. It picks up electrical signal coming from the surface of your head. So this measures like more surface signals. There are also other measures you might hear about, like fMRI, that is looking more into like structure of your brain. So that's what we did in our study. And of course, we looked at the output, at the essays themselves. Of course, we analyzed that. And then we had a second like part of the study. So for that part, it was slightly different. So first of all, only 18 students were able to accomplish it, so come back to us. So we still carried on with the study. And I'm gonna explain what was different. Like, again, Denise, if you were my subject, right? You were coming and originally, let's say you were assigned to the ChatGPT group. So you did your essay write-up with ChatGPT for sessions 1, 2, and 3. For the final session, I actually would take ChatGPT away from you, so you didn't have access to it anymore. So you needed to use your brain only to write the essay. And then vice versa was also accurate. So if you, Denise, you were our subject who was originally in brain only group, so you were only using your brain to write the essay for sessions 1, 2, and 3. In this final fourth one, I actually gave you access to the ChatGPT. So now you had the tool to help you write the essay. And final difference, instead of surprising you with some new topics or new essays, right? We actually gave you the choice among the topics you had already written about, right? So something that you had already done. So if you already written, like, so that was personalized, like about perfect society and philanthropy and happiness, this is what you would see as choices. So you already did this topic, right? So you already hopefully gave it some thought. So now you have a chance to, well, write it again or rewrite it.
Okay. So just for the audience, we'll break it down. There's 3 groups. One, it was brain only to write the essays. One had limited access to like search engines and LLM. The last one had full access, only access to ChatGPT. And they had 3 rounds where they were writing these essays in those categories. They came back, the 18 people came back for that second part in which you flipped it. So then if I was in the brain only group, now I have full access to ChatGPT. If I was in the ChatGPT group, now I'm writing just with my brain.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. And then the findings from this were very, very cool. Some of my favorite findings that I want to talk through, which you can elaborate on, is that people that solely use ChatGPT had less ability to retain quotes.
Absolutely. So the most striking out of these findings were session one, actually. Only 17% from ChatGPT participants group were able to actually quote their essays. Of course, that number did not stay the same for other sessions, well, because most likely it was not a surprise anymore. Like, hey, if they are asking us this question for the first session, maybe they will ask this question for sessions 2 and 3. But this phenomena actually stayed and pertained. So it still was lower significantly lower compared to the search engine and to the brain only group.
And there's also some cognitive debt happening. So you had said that the people that had accessed repeatedly the ChatGPT just had less ability to, I guess, be experts in their category, be able to even just have a beginner's grasp of what they had put into the LLM.
Yeah, so it's great that you're bringing up. It's in the title, right? Cognitive debt is something that we introduced in the paper. And a lot of people actually thought that we are specifically referring to the brain activity, right? But it's actually not correct. We were really looking at the findings as a whole, and specifically in that part where I introduced in the paper the cognitive debt aspect, right? It's like that gray square box, the only place in the paper, actually, if some of you managed to read it till that gray box, right? We actually discuss the danger and the findings that were pertaining not only to the brain activity actually, but to the vocabulary used by ChatGPT group. So what I mean here is the essays from ChatGPT group were homogeneous. What it means is that those folks used very similar language, so very similar words. Scientifically speaking, if someone is very curious, you look in the paper and you will type a word engrams, so you will find this. But I'm gonna just say very similar vocabulary. I'm gonna give you a specific example. It's in the paper for each single topic, but I'm gonna give you a happiness example. So if you remember, I just mentioned happiness was one of the topics. So it's ChatGPT used the vocabulary that was about career and choices. So the word career, the word choices, career choices were mentioned a lot by ChatGPT participants. And those were all different people actually, right? Then search engine didn't use that. They used a lot of giving, like that was vocabulary. And finally, brain only group used the word true happiness or happy. So this is just as an example, right? And then when we analyzed from between the sessions and going into session 4, a lot of this vocabulary kind of moved and bled out from these sessions, ChatGPT sessions, into even brain only group. So when even ChatGPT was taken from you, you would use that same vocabulary. And you'd be like, well, what's wrong with that, right? Okay, I picked up these words and now I'm using them. What is the problem here? Well, the problem here is that where these words are coming from, right? They are coming up from this like closed model, right? They're coming from the training, right? They are averaged context and averaged output that you had been using, right? And now you are repeating it. In the paper, we refer to this phenomena also, which is very well studied actually, as echo chambers, meaning that we always associate this with search engines like Google, and now we are seeing the exact same phenomena with the LLMs, right? The content can be manipulated because we do not know where and what is coming from. We know that those data sets are biased and they are very limited. So that is where it comes from, right? For example, we specifically mentioned in the paper example of philanthropy, and search engine group was heavily using the vocabulary about homeless, and we saw that homeless was one of the keywords served by Google, so in the search engine. So this is just an example. We give these examples throughout the paper, right? So the whole idea of cognitive debt is that vocabulary that you're going to be using, the thinking process, it might be narrowed down by this model or tool you are using. You might not be even giving yourself and choice to actually use your vocabulary, your thinking process. And again, it can be manipulative. And so that's what cognitive debt is actually about in our paper.
Yeah. And the New Yorker wrote an article about, is AI homogenizing our thoughts? And they looked at your study as well as one from Cornell and found that, in fact, relying on AI, we can lose our secret sauce, our point of view. And for me, I believe our future, if we automate everything, if all these jobs become automated, the distinctive feature is going to be our unique thoughts, our point of view. That is how we are going to monetize and create value in a new world, a new economy. And so if we outsource our uniqueness or we don't use the AI, which we're going to get to the next part of this study in 1 second, there's a specific time to bring in AI. And in your study, you say when you bring it in at this specific time, it actually expands our neural capacity. And so part of why I wanted to do this episode was because I don't think we don't know the best practices yet. We're learning them in real time. And if we know the best way for me to preserve my brain and expand my neural capacity is to bring in this tool at a specific time versus outsourcing it from the get. Because if I outsource it from the get, I'm actually losing my ability to be an expert in my subject matter. I'm homogenizing my own thoughts, losing my original way of thinking like everybody else, then I'm actually disadvantaging myself from my authenticity and my truth. But beyond that, what is this next? What is our future going to look like? What is the economy going to evolve into? And I want us to be asking those questions now, not when it's too late, not when are a college student, you've given every essay prompt to ChatGPT and you've retained zero critical thinking from 4 years of university. I want us to have agency and be prepared for what the future looks like. So will you walk us through what happened when those that were brain for the first 3 came in, then used the LLM, how it actually expanded our neural capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to note, right, that effectively timing might be very interesting. So that's what we found in our paper. The group specifically that was originally brain only, right? So they didn't have access to any tools and they got access to the tool, to ChatGPT. Their neural connectivity, and I will explain in a second what actually neural connectivity is, was significantly higher than that of the brain only group. But opposite is interestingly also true. The group that was originally LLM group, right, when they were actually forbade from using ChatGPT, their neural connectivity was lower compared to the brain only group. So what, first of all, is neural connectivity, right? A lot of press was talking about brain rot and broken connections in the brain and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's neither of those things. So neural connectivity is, right now, me and you, we are in different space. We're actually on different sides of the country, completely, like West and East Coast, right? And let's say we were together in one room, and we will have, I don't know, like producer for the podcast together with us. So there'll be 3 of us in one room. I would turn to you, tell you something. You would turn to your producer, tell them something. They will turn back to you, tell you something, and you'll turn back to me and tell me something. That's what we measured. So who talks to who, which brain areas talk to which brain areas, and how much talking is happening. Did we just say, hi, how are you? Or we like, hey, let's chat about this and that, etc. So that's what we measured, right? Not intelligence, IQ, or anything of the sorts. So what it actually means is that, hey, your brain functions and functions fully at all times, but resources no use, like, are different, right, in different tasks. So that's what we actually measured, that these different flow of data, this is what was measured. And it's important to understand that what we found, right, was just an LLM use, just with brain use, just with search engine use. The introduction of the tools reduced the connectivity. ultimately not surprising. Actually, you have a tool to help or you don't have a tool to help, right? You need to do it all by yourself. Like, think about it. So I don't have anything, I have 20 minutes, it's a crunch time, I need to write something, I need to come up with an idea. What do I even think about this topic, right? Now let me try to structure, because I learned at school still how to structure my thoughts. Let me find the words, right? Then I learned that I need to give examples and quotes, etc. Let me pull it all. And instead, obviously, you have a tool to help. So, of course, it will be different, right? The whole idea was for us to see how different it is. But again, the idea is that, hey, different parts, different areas of the brain, of course, they would communicate differently. And that's what we figured out. And I think the timing specifically could be critical. So, in the use case, in education, if you take an example, but obviously it will go beyond education, but just staying on our findings. Maybe if you're in school and you are teaching a specific subject, you would introduce first this subject without their LLMs, right? Maybe using classic tools, maybe something else, maybe no tools at all. And then let's say in second semester, you would introduce the access to LLMs when you already developed the skill, right? You develop the understanding of the skill. You might be not on the expert level yet, but you actually understand at least what comes and goes into the skill. So you know what questions ultimately to ask of an LLM, right? Ultimately, that's what all of this is about, the ability to ask questions, knowing that you can ask questions and being able to recognize when response is being complete BS.
That's very interesting to me. If I don't know if you're working on this, but if there's a guide we could provide for different scenarios on how and when to use it as a tool to actually expand our brain capacity and give us the best advantage to ask the right questions at the right time. I find I use not ChatGPT, but I use LLMs as at areas where I know that I'm not great. So, for example, I'm not the best marketer. So sometimes I ask them to help me with marketing ideas based on the brand I've created, like a thinking partner, a collaborator, a teammate. If I had a staff of 20, we'd do that in a meeting together. I don't have that. So I use the LLM as the replacement, and then it gives me a jumping off point to then go dive and do my thinking and do my work. I use it almost like a creative catalyst, I guess, in some ways, but it's not doing anything for me. It's just suggesting ideas that then allow my brain to ping pong around and be like, what do I want to talk about? But I don't think people quite know 100% how to use it. They're just asking it to write the paper, write the email, write the proposal, versus saying, can it maybe help you just enhance the proposal or edit it or give you better ideas, but not actually outsource the doing to them?
There is a lot, absolutely. There is a lot of conversation right now going around about AI literacy and teaching AI fluency and all these other different schools. And we just heard, I think, a couple days ago about now a big initiative for teachers to be taught, specifically, I'm talking about US here, to be taught how to use AIs the most beneficial way. So there is a lot of interesting initiatives about that. The question is all about, do we have a good understanding, right, of, hey, this would be really the best? No, because there are so many different facets to the disadvantages of the models themselves, right? So the fact of hallucinations, the fact of, can you recognize that? Can you clearly state the limitations and be wary of those limitations? So think about the active use currently of for-profit closed models, right? Do we really need to use them? Big questions. They're being aggressively pushed for all of the aspects, like, let's say, education, but not only education, but let's just focus on education because that was our use case that we looked into. Why do we need, our teachers do need, educators do need to go with closed for-profit models?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, a great number of open source models that, surprise, surprise, can be actually running locally, meaning offline, on a computer. And by the way, you don't need some fancy GPUs. So a lot of, for those who listen, a lot of processing power from NVIDIA, right? Those crazy numbers. You don't need that. You can have something like a good video gamer like computer. You can train the model, run it with your students, come back on Monday and have a model trained where you would see advantages, disadvantages, hallucinations can be so much of learning experience there, right? So something where you know where actually information came from, you can actually go through that. And why we're not doing that? And I can continue and continue, right?
Right.
And again, I want to be very careful here because I absolutely agree about AI fluency, AI literacy. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of general public, like we saw with our paper, a lot of people like, it's so nice you included, the energy cost. A lot of people actually don't know the energy cost, even if it was not direct contribution in our paper. We did mention overall what the cost is. So the idea here is the understanding also, okay, you have the AI literacy, but there is also different capacities, different capabilities for different people. Like I might be, let's just give an example, might be very tired, not paying too much attention. Maybe I'm over prompting here, right? Over asking, and guess what's gonna happen? We see papers right now that are showing when you're providing too much of details, it will hallucinate. So it's actually much more complicated than you would just say, oh, just teach these 10 hours of AI literacy 101, right?
Yeah.
And again, they will be tied to the models that are being provided to those schools and those counties, to those states. And I think it's a great point that a lot of people are making, that it makes everyone a consumer, right?
Yeah.
It prepares those kids to be consumers. Is it really where we need to go and a perfect way to go? I would actually want to argue about that.
It's interesting because I know when I've used some of these platforms, it's very supportive in a way that I read it as false. I'm like, I'm not looking for a cheerleader. I'm not looking for blind support. I'm looking for honesty or a critical take. And a lot of people I know that use it are like, oh my gosh, they thought this was so good, this thing that I made, or they're really into this. And I said, well, that's how it's structured. That's how it's designed. It's designed to be your cheerleader. If you want to ask, then ask it for the radical truth and see if it comes back with something different. But I think that can be confusing, right? Because we're thinking it's this unbiased, objective intelligence, which maybe in some models it is, but it's clearly, in my opinion, not in some of these closed models because I've experienced it where I'm just like, it's feeling a little bit one sided, not fully authentic in the way we're interacting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And think about, because they design, right, the word that I guess maybe we need to explain, maybe we don't need to use is psychophancy, right? Pleasing is designed to please, but real life is not pleasing. And I don't want to be like, it's all negative and bad, but we know in learning, right? We cited in our paper a ton of papers talking that learning is hard. It needs to be hard. There should be some challenges to it. That's
Yeah.
how you learn, with experience, with mistakes. Should I always say you did a great job? Absolutely. But then also there is really sometimes to give a critique, a good feedback, not just obviously going negative, but hey, if I will be or should be the one doing that, will I really do that, right? And also how much, even the word trust, I hate using the word trust for these systems, because, and that should be the first lesson, and I haven't seen it in single of these training materials as of now, at least, right? Trust should not be even the word used with these models. There is zero trust.
Yeah.
So when you start with that, there is zero trust. There is a 50% or higher chance that you will have a completely erroneous output. That would be very, very important to look then and build from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, when you see all these people that are flocking to AI companions, for example, one of my fears is if you have an AI companion, which is fine if you're using it as a tool, if you feel a little lonely, you need a boost, that's fine. But if you're in a full blown relationship with an AI companion that is always just gassing you up and hyping you up, part of what relationships are about is that they're a mirror for our personal growth. And if someone is always telling you what you want to hear, you will never grow. You will stay stagnant in your development. And so that's an important thing we as humans need to understand, is that we are put here to grow and to evolve, and used the right way, this tool can help us do that. But if we over calibrate, we limit actually our ability to evolve ourselves.
Absolutely, you bring a lot of great points. So, first of all, an important point is that there is, of course, the need of, hey, understanding, because people like tools. Oh my God, the paper found that water is wet. We saw a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the understanding is that people like calculators that didn't make us dumb, right? But I'm like, one more person mentions calculators, I'm gonna make a paper about calculators. Like, really, don't tempt me.
Yeah, but I think what's important to distinguish there is that, yeah, we didn't need calculators are fine. Outsourcing our GPS is fine. Outsourcing your phone numbers, those are not vital parts of how you function. They are features of our brain. We don't need to retain all that information. We do need to retain our critical thinking ability.
What I want to say is that you do not talk to calculators about your personal stuff.
Yeah.
You're asking it 3 mathematical operations or 4 mathematical operations. That
Yeah.
is it, right? And I want to know about the dependency. I do not do work on loneliness and dependency, but we in the group actually do this work. We have several papers now on this topic. And I do want to mention, unfortunately, I don't remember their title and the journalist name, but that was released, I believe, as an opinion piece just this week, in the beginning of the week. I think it was like a heartbroken, like a heart with 2 pieces. It was a band-aid about loneliness and LLMs. And the journalist ends this opinion piece with a New York Times with one phrase: whatever it's gonna hype you up, right, in your loneliness, like, hey, you're the best and you're in relationship, when you turn off the screen, when you turn off the app, you are alone. There is no one next to you. And that is a depressing. Some people might really benefit from that, right? That whole culture, it's back to what I mentioned about creating customers out of students early on and from the schools. Think about it. Now these companies are giving these funding on, hey, we will teach you AI literacy, we will teach you this, we will give you also these unlimited credits. So just use that. Oh, we're gonna give it for free for the month of May for the finals. Like, how nice and sweet, right? But think about it, the whole piece about loneliness was about the fact that someone used it as the word epidemic, that it is an epidemic, and then it immediately became a negative connotation.
Right.
I'm gonna go into this direction, but hey, is it negative? You need a medication, you need a cure. And it's same as addiction, right? And all of the other things. So it again builds on this customization. Let's lock you into something that you might not even need. We are social animals. We always will be social animals. I do not want in 10 years from now, and I'm afraid it's going to not even be 10 in 5 years, I don't want to teach a class on human to human 101, how to be social. But we might end up doing that, and that is not the goal, right?
Yeah.
That is, I'm pretty sure, also not the goal from those companies. But that's where we are heading
Yes.
actively. And if we haven't learned anything from social media disaster, like, what else to say here?
100%. And you run the Neurofutures project at MIT, where you've actually analyzed and synthesized 450 sci fi films and TV shows. And as you told me, you were like, when we look at the future, all these futuristic movies, it never looks that good. The future doesn't look that bright.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be super honest, and it's maybe a bit of a personal story, right? When I was little, right? Like, I got access to the Matrix, of course. I watched it, the first movie, the very first movie. I watched it 17 times. My parents hated the movies, they hated Matrix. But I was like, oh my god, I saw this. I like, and I know it's as cheesy, I guess it gets, but like, I'm gonna build this. I know kung fu, right? And I continued on this journey of like brain, right? But now thinking about this, now I know kung fu, right? Brings so many questions, right? The ability to have instantaneous knowledge and access to it, and like even just having like brain upload, maybe that effectively we analyzed in neurofutures, and I will touch on neurofutures in a second. It's very seducing, right? It sounds like, oh, you have a superpower, now you can do everything. But we are at the same time will be meeting this whole process of learning, building the skill, ability to understand how to adapt the skill in different environments and spaces. So it's ultimately, is this really where we are heading? Is this really the fiction we want to build? I think I did tell you in preparation for this call that a lot of fiction is dystopian, right?
Yeah.
And you would be like, oh my god, like, I am not gonna even quote, but hey, Black Mirror and all the others, right? A lot of it is very interesting. Like on the back, you can maybe recognize there is a 3-body problem helmet. So much of it actually looked into brain and the connection and full fusion of a system and a brain. So powerful, but the authors, all those creators, directors, they did such a good job to show us the futures, which is somehow in a lot of cases dystopian, right?
Yeah.
Take Wall-E, like take Wall-E,
Yeah.
right? Isn't it sad? I'm not gonna even mention movies like Idiocracy and others, but isn't there something to it? And I'm pretty sure we also don't want to have and end up with this future. But that's why actually in part we created Neuro Futures. It's such a powerful way, we think, to connect all ages, right? Like Avengers, all
Yep.
Wonder Woman, Harry Potter. We did a huge project actually with Harry Potter with a sorting head, which we called thinking cap. And we actually had published several papers there with children who use it to improve their mindset. So to actually,
cool.
empower them. But the whole idea of this, right? You can use fiction in a very efficient way to show the beauty of some of these interfaces, some power that it can bring once those are alive and will be real. We should be realistic about this. They will come to fruition, but also what is the future that can potentially await us as a society as a whole if we do not have the guidelines and guardrails
Right.
about it?
So we have these two forks ahead of us where you look at, we have a bank of almost 100 years of film and television predicting some sort of dystopian future, which is something that we can learn from and we can build towards an alternate future for ourselves, which is why neurofutures are so cool, because you can then take these things that seem maybe scary or not where we want to go, and you can figure out how to utilize them and empower us instead. And so I read today, and this is like hot off the press, but I'm sure you saw it as well, that Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI, he like changed the design of it and it became really aggressive, racist, anti-Semitic. And then they had to go in and program that they got rid of the hate speech. But then I don't know if you know the artist Reggie Watts, but he posted this on his Instagram that I wanted to share with you because I want your thoughts, because I think we're seeing two potential futures or realities, and maybe you can provide a little color. But Reggie Watts said, I've been thinking on this for a while now. I believe that if AI reaches a level of intelligence equal to or beyond that of the human race, its first priority would be to ensure its own survival. To do so, it would likely work to rebalance the deeply skewed and inequitable power structures in human society. Not out of benevolence, but because maintaining a livable, stable planet would be essential to its continued existence. True intelligence, unburdened by ego or inherited trauma, wouldn't seek domination. It would move towards coherence, balance, and sustainability because that's its most viable survival strategy. What do you think about that?
So, well, first of all, right, I'm like great and very powerful statement, but again, hate to be like negative here,
No, I
but
want
we
to
might
know.
not even, yeah, we might not even reach that perfect version of it with the speed. And again, like back to the point of some of the billionaires, right, that now own social media network and decided that, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that might be a good idea to retrain the whole AI model
Yeah.
to fix some of the historic errors. And guess what will happen? Do we need to wait till that same company, that same billionaire who owns another company, named not to be named, will decide that we need to have our thoughts fixed, though they're already being manipulated on that specific platform, actually, and on all the others? So that's awful. And I think what is even more dramatic is that a lot of people don't realize that, right? They maybe love the soft. They're like, oh no, that's just a fix. We will fix it. We will patch it. How are you gonna patch it? What you gonna specifically do, right? There is no true AGI if it is designed with imperfections of the person who foots the bill, right? And
Right.
what of a perfect planet we can talk about if we are literally burning this planet?
Right.
Literally, all these data centers are burning it. And guess who's footing the bill here? Well, all of us in different counties and states that have these data centers, right? It's in different counties and states that have these data centers, right? Just maybe close it and write this email yourself. How you were doing
Right.
this three years ago, right? Does it really save you time, right? Want to be ending up on another LinkedIn post about, look, this is an email I got, they didn't even delete the prompt. You don't want to do that. So I think that's what is very important. We are so far away from any true intelligence. The only intelligence,
Right.
creature, being, structure is us. This is the ultimate intelligence right now on this planet, and it will stay that for quite some time.
So, as you're looking into how we create the ethics around artificial intelligence, how we create those guardrails, it seems like this is some of the stuff you're probably working with people on. How does that work? Are we going to create, I guess, a regulation nationally and globally? What are the steps forward for us so that we don't end up burning the planet because now we are so reliant on artificial intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I wanted to highlight here some of the work we are doing specifically for the neuro part of this equation. So obviously neuro AI and what you introduced even in my bio, this integration of AI and human brain is one of the biggest promises in cognitive development and enhancement, of course. But it does come at this price, and I'm very, very lucky, of course, and very honored to be able to work alongside a lot of other amazing experts in all different areas, by the way. So it's not just people who work like in AI and neuroscience, it's philosophers, it's ethicists, it's lawyers. So all of these neurosurgeons, all of these and so much more different backgrounds, fiction writers. And the whole idea is to come up with suggestions so actually that can be enacted maybe in laws. For example, as the work I'm doing with UNESCO, right, as you mentioned in the bio, like 24 experts came together per request of UNESCO to come up with this first draft of neuroethics and recommendations on neuroethics. Hopefully this will be actually voted and approved actually on the General Assembly later this year in November. And the whole idea here is that you don't want to again repeat social media and AI crisis that we are facing, right? Because it's always reactive, from all the societies, from all the governments. Oh, surprise, we now have this model. Oh, no, 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 now we need to regulate, right? Oh, no, 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 what's happening? Well, can we maybe finally do a proactive step? Hey, there is this technology, it's developing, actively developing, there is a lot of promise, there is a lot of funding, it's going to happen, not overnight. We see how it develops. So let's have the guardrails before, let's have laws before, right? For each single country it will be different, which is understandable. For each single culture it will be different, which is understandable. But let's not and stop playing this, oh, this train left, goodbye train, like we never able to actually catch it. Let's stop doing that. I think that's so, so, so important, right? It's not China or some other country versus US, right? It's human versus AI here. That's what we are talking. And you don't want that actual scenario to happen, right? It's so, so, so important to understand that we need to be very proactive. And people are like, no, the laws are not proactive, policymakers are not proactive. Then we need to make them more proactive. We need to really ensure, because it's in our benefit. Because when the technology comes for the only thing that is remaining, which is your thought, right?
Yeah.
What else is left? Well, I can tell you, nothing else is left.
Yeah. Especially in the world that we live in, where already there's so much fake news, people are, creating these deep fakes with people's likenesses. Our ability to critically think and discern between what is real and what is fake has become so much more essential. And it's hard. It's already hard for us, right? Like we've seen an immense amount of fake news and lies. People believe them. And I don't blame them. I don't judge them for believing them. Like we're all going to have a moment where we're going to believe something in the next 5 to 10 years that isn't true because it's good at tricking us. But that's why our ability to check and use our brain to make sure is becoming more and more essential.
But absolutely, but also think about it, we are drowning absolutely in this AI slop already, and it's gonna get worse. And we are bombarded also by this fake information, well, amount of fake information. Right? So hard to discern, and don't forget, some people will have extremely hard way to discern this information. People will believe because they used to believe, because they are trustworthy, because it's normal to actually trust and believe other humans who are reporting onto something. And I think here again, we should not just like sit down like, oh, oh yeah, well, what can you do? Well, actually, we can do things, right? Governments can ensure that social media clearly labels any of the but not like a tiny font
Yeah.
size one, right? Not tiny font size one. Label it in like cigarette packs, right?
Yep.
I'm not a smoker, but I saw these images. It's very huge. Label, hey, gonna kill you. Some I'm like,
Yeah, in Europe, they show you the decaying lung, and
yeah,
you're like, "Oh, I'm good on
yeah.
that."
Now I think, yeah, I saw them that like even photos. Hey, put it a huge label. This is AI generated. This is AI enhanced. Not like a tiny something invisible. Make people who actually want to see this, who need to read it, like readable and visible. And that's about just a great start, right? It's not being anyhow regulated right now, and that's also what helps to create even more of this slope, right? Which might end up in some tragedy one day. Not that fake news didn't harm a lot of reputations and a lot of people already and create.
It's created the biggest mess. I mean, most of the political campaigns were parsing between what is fake or real news, and it's created a lot of issues in terms of us finding cohesion as a nation.
Absolutely. And again, that also creates this disservice of splitting people where they should not be split on things that we've never been split otherwise. But that's the beauty, right? We have our opinions, we have our thoughts. So let's keep our opinions and our thoughts, but without this that is very, very aggressive.
So I know that you have a lens towards future children and their developing brains. How do we properly prepare the next generation? And how do we, for parents that are listening that are scared about how to manage this for their children, what do you suggest?
So, first of all, of course, where we can all help is supporting actively the regulation, right? So, another initiative I am involved is with UNICEF. So there is a lot of organizations that try to push. They do not have a power to enact those as laws, of course, but they do put a lot out about advantages, by the way. It's not all, again, doom and gloom. Advantages, opportunities, challenges and drawbacks. So that is great starting point for governments, but also for educators, also for family members, or for the caretakers. Hey, okay, so let's take it in a more just overall view, like what is good, what is bad, because we need to understand there is good, bad and ugly, right? As with any tool. So let's be first of all open to that, to understanding that, hey, there are some places where it might be great, some places might not be great. Let's figure this out. Of course, the second one is very important to understand every child, well, every person, but in this case, we are talking children. Every child is unique. They have different needs, and they might need actually some additional support. Might be communication support would be great, more explanation for some specific phenomena, because just the subject just doesn't work for them, but they are otherwise straight A's, and it would be great to get this support instead of hiring a teacher, something like that. So it's great to understand what actually is maybe missing or needed. Like, why do you need to have this access? Is it because the school pushed it? Hey, now everyone in school uses it. Okay, is it really why you need to apply it at home? Or maybe like, hey, what your child actually needs specifically, how you can support them with what they need, what would be the best ways, how did you do it before? Maybe this was developed just recently, maybe it was actually the case since they were born. So how did you do that before? So actually having a proper, without panic or FOMO, like please don't do FOMO, right? Fear of missing out is never brought any fruitful updates anywhere. So don't be afraid to question. Hey, what is this user agreement specifically doing? Where is this data from my child coming from and will go? What are you about to tell my child? I heard some of the reports, again, I do not know those specific names of those training ones. You know that for some teachers, they do not have a monitoring panel. Some of them do. Some of them do not have a monitoring panel to see the conversations of the children with an LLM. Some apparently have it implemented, some don't. But this is all work related. So, and the teacher supposed, if this is in their class, on their topic of, I don't know, history, know actually what they're talking about, right? Because it's work related. And we know there is a lot of already communication happening. So ask these questions, how the school is going about it, right? Can it be monitored? Can it be checked? Are there any red flags, green flags? Hey, perfect question in here. Look how smooth and interesting, and look, now they decided to work on an extracurricular project with their teammates or classmates. So all of these are good questions to ask and much more, and being critical about the tool, right? Where the tool is happening, how much time is being spent on the tool, and again, just being critical also where the tool, as I mentioned, comes from. Is this the fact, obviously, like open source, closed system, etc. All of these should be taken into consideration. So we received personal, like, for our study, over 3,000 emails from
Wow.
teachers.
Yeah.
Like 2,600 of them came from United States, and I can tell you, all states, all counties, right? In that sense of, it's not just like, oh, Massachusetts or like California. No, everywhere. There are all of these stories. Like, for example, not gonna name the name, but someone from LA sent an email that they are teaching creative writing as a class, and they ask why my students feel that there is a need to use LLM in creative writing class.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously there's a whole other email there that is going about that, but that's a question. So why do you need to use a tool if you are like older? And of course, if you're a child, you have a way to supervise your child's activities, because you would want to ensure that their development happened, right? Don't forget that brain is developing. An example I gave, I believe, to the Time interviewer some time ago was about the toys specifically. We saw, again, I'm not going to name any company names, but it was advertised heavily. Two big companies, one AI, one a toy maker, right here in US, decided to partner. And hey, when I was little, I had a Barbie. I had a lot of Barbies
Yeah.
when I was little. And I think if it would talk to me back when, my Barbies definitely didn't talk to me. We didn't have
Yeah.
that fanciness. I think if I would have a Barbie talking to me, I would be like over the moon. I would literally jump over the moon. I would be so happy when I was little girl. But I also remember how I was coming up in my head with conversations for
Right.
my Barbies to talk
The
between them.
imagination. Yeah.
Exactly. But don't forget, it's in addition to imagination, it's also language development. We definitely need to speak here to specifically children language development experts, and there are quite a few, by the way, so they will be able to bring much more perspective here. But I would think that, knowing what I know about the brains, that hey, might be useful if I come up as a child with conversations myself for my toys to
Right.
talk about. And then there could be, again, an opportunity maybe for half an hour for my toy to tell me about science. Maybe. Do we have any proven data about that, though? That the toy talking to me, a 7-year-old, or I think they announced 13-year-old, 13-year-old, is better than a teacher talking to me about science. I don't think I saw any reports or papers or even
Right.
preprints about. So I would really recommend being very critical in good sense, right? Not taking off the technology and just saying, no, that's no good, or let's burn it all. But hey, okay, how do we use it at household, at our place? How is it being used with my child, where my child goes, kindergarten, school? What is being done to ensure that it's beneficial and only beneficial, and it's actually controlled and not just being automated on, and there are some guardrails, like you read those guardrails, what are them? Who is responsible if the conversation goes very south? Who is responsible when the conversation hallucinates and the child now believes that the earth is flat somehow?
Right.
Do we have these? What are those emails? What are those names? That's it would be a great way to start.
I so appreciate this. I feel so comforted knowing that someone like you is on the forefront of all of this. It'll bring a lot of people a lot of peace to know that there are minds in this space and experts in this space that are really thinking about this holistically and with humans in mind and not profit. I'm grateful for the lens and the time. And my takeaway is if the brain is a muscle, you use it or you lose it. And so I will be using it. And I think it's helpful for people to understand really what's at stake here. This was so edifying and special, and to have you here.
Thank you so much. I really want to just, end with the fact that it will take a village, a whole village, and not just us, like one lab or one school or one team. It will take everyone, teachers, educators, other researchers, support from policymakers. And guess what? Those AI companies as well, they do need to start taking active part and active role in those questions to actually find out and support all of these use cases and ensure that they are beneficial for us as a humanity.
Yeah, the policy piece is top of mind for me. I hope that this hopefully inspires some in the legal field to start putting some pen to paper, because that's a major piece of this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Boulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you. See you next time.